Coming out to your parents is tough, especially if they're conservative. So what if they're ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews? Abby Stein, a descendant of one of Hasidic Judaism's founders, has come out as transgender. And today she's shedding light on her transition and the world she left behind. Abby joins us now. Abby, thanks for being here. What was it like, first of all, growing up Hasidic?
There's a lot that could be said about growing up in an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic home. Mainly, I would classify it as really sheltered. I grew up without access to TV, internet, movies, shows. Newspapers were limited to heavily centered, community-only Yiddish newspapers. Like these things could differ from family to family, but at least this is how it was from my experience. I had almost no general education at all. We had 5 years of, I would say, studying English and math, where we got up to a second grade level in English, maybe a fourth grade level of math, but that's it. And the same with any other thing. Like, it's a really sheltered environment, and I really got the image that most of the world is the way we are, and there's only like a few people who are slightly different. So obviously, growing up, I always had these like feelings about my gender identity, but I didn't know that it exists. Even the rest of the LGBT community doesn't exist. They will never recognize that it exists. So obviously, I didn't know anything about the trans experience.
Were you aware of what you weren't aware of? In other words, even if you didn't feel that you had any access to the LGBT community, were you at least aware in your periphery that there were gay people out there and there were trans people out there, even if how to become a part of that community was opaque?
Yeah, so trans people I actually didn't know until I started leaving and looking at the internet, I would say around 2011, 2012. Gay people I did hear a bit earlier, mainly during the time that gay marriage was a discussion of legalizing gay marriage in New York. There were some people within the community who started fighting it, so that was the first time I was aware that that's something that actually exists. I mean, I was aware that it's in the Bible, but I thought it's something like a lot of other things that just exist in the Bible. I never thought that it exists in real life.
And what was the process of you realizing that you were trans? How old were you, and how did you sort of contextualize it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I was aware since I remember myself. The first conscious thought of being, hey, I feel like a girl, or this is what I identify with or relate to, was already when I was 6 years old. And going forward from that time, I always had a lot of different ideas in my head of how I could actually turn into a girl physically. And as I said, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything like that exists. So obviously, I had no context for medical transition and anything that exists today. But I would still come up with weird ideas that a 7-year-old kid would think about, or later a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, of how it's possible for me to become the girl that I felt I am.
And so what was the process of coming out, and how did the community and your family respond?
And so the coming out has been kind of a pretty long process. It has been first coming out to myself. Even after I left the community 4 years ago and I started being aware, I've been reading a lot about the subject in the last 4 years. I was still terrified of the idea. I couldn't face it, that knowing this is who I am, but I couldn't face the thought of transition. The first time I was like faced with it pretty straightforward was last spring when I went to see a gender specialist, and after a few sessions, she told me, this is what's going on, and like in the medical terms, it's gender dysphoria. But my response to that was stopping to see her. I got like so terrified. Then finally in August, I had no choice. My life wasn't a life anymore, and I had to start doing something about transition. So at that point, I started coming out slowly, like very slowly, to different people, first to professionals, then to really close friends. And then it got to a point where I felt I'm ready to come out in public. And there was another reason also, besides being myself in public, that was really relieving and really a good experience, is also that there were so many people who started contacting me through my blog that they suffered from the same problems, or that they struggle with that and they are looking for help and they didn't know anyone else. So I start feeling more and more that I have an opportunity to raise awareness about the subject and to get people to talk about it. And I was aware the whole time that the community is going to have a pretty negative response, but I had nothing to do with them for the last 4 years. I left 4 years ago. I live in the Upper West Side now. I'm a student at Columbia. I don't really face them. The only relationship that I still had was my parents. So I knew that I have to come out to my father before I come out. I would call it, make it Facebook official, come out totally in public. So I came out to my father last week. I really tried my best to tell it to him in a language that he understands. I gathered sources mainly from Jewish mysticism, where this idea of some kind of fluidity and gender exists. And I tried to explain it to him, this is what's going on. And as I expected, his response was more shocked than anything else. But I haven't heard from him since. And then when I came out, I posted my article online, and I have to admit I was not expecting it to go as viral as it went. I was not expecting to get interviews anytime soon. But when it did happen, most of the comments that I got, obviously from my friends that I have now in school and my community and people who also left the ultra-Orthodox community, but even from people still within the community, I got a lot of calls for help, like people who struggle with similar things, but also a lot of people from the community. I was shocked I had a pretty positive response. And obviously there was the very strong negative response that I knew will come anyway.
Are you still religious?
That's a complicated question. I'm definitely very, very heavily involved in Jewish life. I'm a member of a synagogue that is part of the Jewish Renewal Movement. It's a pretty non-dualistic Jewish philosophy, ideology. I joke a lot that I believe in Judaism more than I believe in God. But yeah, and some definitely culturally and spiritually, I would say I'm religious. If you're looking on a more strictly observant way, then no, I'm not.
We've seen such a huge growth in awareness of the transgender community and the transgender experience in popular culture over the past few years with Caitlyn Jenner and Transparent, shows like Transparent and Orange is the New Black. But obviously in ultra-Orthodox communities, they're not consuming that culture, right? Are you hopeful that there will be some kind of an opening up of the Orthodox community to the LGBT experience? So
I really, really hope so. And even by now, what it seems to be that I already achieved was starting a conversation. And it's no longer the fact that I could just deny it or ignore it. It got to a point where everyone is talking about it, and specifically because of my family, people know my family, people knew me. Everyone is talking about it. It started a conversation. I agreed to talk to certain news outlets that I might have not agreed to talk otherwise, but I wanted to get it out. I wanted to start a conversation. I also started a Facebook group, a Facebook supporter group, but I added the people that reached out to me, and it has been very successful the last few days, and hopefully getting people to tell their stories. I remember for myself, if I would have just known when I was 12, when I was 14, there's other people with the same experience, it would have helped me so much. So now if I feel I can just give people that, to know there are other people like that, and give them just an outlet, even anonymously, even online, where they can talk and share, would be a great achievement.
Abby, Mazel Tov, good to talk to you. Thanks for being here.